Welcome to the Wicket.
Hello and welcome to The Wicket, the weekly podcast from Arab News with all things cricket from the Gulf region, Asia and everywhere beyond. I'm Brian Murgatroyd and as usual, I'm joined by Arab News columnist Jon Pike and Arab News reporter Subas Humagain. And we've got masses to chat about this time around. We'll wrap up the ICC Cricket World Cup, reviewing the final in which Australia beat India to claim their sixth men's title. And we'll also reflect on the tournament as a whole. Pakistan's failings in the World Cup have prompted major changes there, which continue to unfold, and we'll unpack them for you. We'll speak about the ongoing situation in Sri Lanka, which has been suspended by the ICC following allegations of political interference in the administration of the sport there. A clock is to be introduced in white ball international cricket to try and speed up play. We'll discuss that innovation. And although it's just a matter of days since the World Cup final, it's time for more live cricket. Australia is all set to go head-to-head with India again. This time in 5 2020 internationals, we'll look ahead to them. Then there's the men's Africa 2020 World Cup qualifier all set to get underway in Windhoek in Namibia, and we'll look ahead to that. And John will tell us all about his trip to Riyadh for the finals of the Saudi National Cricket Championship as we put the microscope on the rapid development of the sport in the kingdom. So plenty to get our teeth into. And let's get started with the ICC Cricket World Cup. Australia won that sixth title with what in the end turned out to be a comprehensive win against India in Ahmedabad. Pat Cummins won the toss, put India into bat and restricted the hosts to 240 all out before Australia recovered from 47 for 3 to knock off the runs with 6 wickets and 7 overs in hand, largely due to the brilliance of Travis Head and Marnus Labuschagne, who added 192 for the fourth wicket. Travis Head became only the 7th player and the 3rd Australian to score 100 in a men's Cricket World Cup final as he powered his way to 137 from 120 balls, while Labuschagne was content to play second fiddle with an unbeaten 58. It was an incredible performance by Australia up against an India side that had played 10 and won 10 in the tournament prior to the match. And it was a triumph for captain Pat Cummins, who got just about every call right on the day and succeeded in doing what he set out to do, which was to silence the massive crowd, estimated in excess of 90,000. John, it all started at the toss when Pat Cummins won it and put India into bat. You were very surprised, I think, at that decision at the time, but with the benefit of hindsight, can you see the sense in the move now?
Well, I wasn't alone in being stunned. I think most of the commentators were also stunned. It was brave, it was bold, it was risky. Some at the time thought it rash, including myself. My Australian friends tell me they prefer it when Pat Cummins loses the toss rather than wins it. And I think what we've learnt in this tournament, but also I think during the Ashes series, you have to read Cummins' comments between the lines. Externally, it seems that he wasn't taken very seriously when appointed. And beneath those sort of boyish looks lies cold steel. I think also the decision, it's not just his decision, it's been taken in unison. If you're going to make a decision like that in a World Cup final, play in the host nation, everybody has to buy into it. And it looks like from the fielding and the bowling that the team did. So Cummins said they kicked it around. Decision, that is, for sure, they must have analysed it pretty extensively in the management team. Clearly some very astute analysts. I should think there are not many people who can actually name the Australian coach. So there's a lot gone under the radar. And it worked, but it was high risk. The bowlers turned up on the day, the best performance collectively, I think, as a unit in the tournament. And of course, India would have battered anyway, I think, if they'd won the toss. So it turned out to be a very astute decision, but it could have gone horribly wrong.
I guess it could have gone horribly wrong. I have to say, when the coin came down and Pat Cummins called correctly and put India into bat. I was actually thinking it was a very good decision because I couldn't see a situation where Australia would score enough runs to put that stellar India batting lineup under pressure in the second innings. So I think there was an element of defence, if you like, in that decision. But Subas, India slipped to 81 for 3 just after the power play before a slow rebuild under Virat Kohli and KL Rahul. They added 67 in 18 overs. There were only 2 fours, in fact, in the innings between overs 11 and 40. Could or should they have been more proactive, or is there more to it than that? With the pitch, the length of the India tail, which we saw was considerable in this match, the pressure of a final, the quality of Australia's bowling and fielding, they're all factors to consider as well. But 67 in 18 overs in modern one-day international cricket, that's slow going.
Yeah, it was indeed a very slow rebuild from Kohli and Rahul. I think they became even more defensive than what was needed. I think one had to keep the scoreboard ticking like we saw in the second innings. I think Travis Head just continued what he started and Marnus Labuschagne was just staying up. And I think Kohli should have taken the role from Rohit Sharma once he went away because you need runs in final. You can't expect bowlers to defend 240 odd runs in the final. And I think it was more fear that India's lower order has not been tested. And I think Kohli and Rahul, I think throughout the tournament, they've been superb with their role. Kohli especially, he was top run getter. And I think they believe that they will get required runs in last 10 overs. But unfortunately, wicket kept falling after that. And I think Surya Kumar Yadav should be distraught that he could not add up anything because I think they counted on Surya and Ravindra Jadeja to fire once the wicket was saved for last 10 overs. And I think Pat Cummins deserves a huge round of applause for what he did. I think changing the bowlers. We talked about the fifth bowler being absent in the Australian lineup, but it never came that. I think Kohli and Rahul never rested because they were focused on saving the wickets, and they did not try any big shots throughout that middle overs. And Australia had them in their hands, and we should also focus on Australia's fielding, especially after the first 2 games. They dropped, I think, 50% of the catch they had chances of. But after that, it was tremendous effort from the fielders in South Africa game, and they just continued it in the second game as well, in the final as well. So I think India have themselves to blame, especially Rahul and Kohli. I think they were more defensive than they should have been.
Jon, what about Pat Cummins' captaincy? At one stage, I think there were 8 bowling changes in 11 overs, from overs 16 to 26. He was superb, wasn't he?
I would think that's probably his finest hour. As I mentioned before, to do what he did, you need buy-in from everybody in the team. Bowlers want to bowl unless they're being smashed around the park. I guess the plan was not to allow the Indians to become too accustomed to one bowler, so they didn't actually get a chance to take anybody on. And I think as Subas mentioned, I mean, it's extraordinary after the power play. I think something like 25 or so overs. So I think there was only 1 4. So Cummins read the pitch well, had unorthodox field placings, and it all worked perfectly.
Subas, when India posted that 240 in the end and then reduced Australia to 47 for 3, did you think India had enough runs?
240 in a final is never enough. I think it was the same case in 2011 as well. We saw Sri Lanka going down against India, and even Pat Cummins said after the game that they were expecting anything around 300, and they believed that they would chase it. I think 240 was very low score, and Indian bowlers needed to come out hard, and I think that's why they brought out Mohammad Sami earlier than expected. He got them the wickets as well. India were in the game when the third wicket fell, but I think Marnus Labuschagne deserves a huge credit. I think he's been through a rough patch. He was not expecting himself to be in the final squad in the playing 11, but he came there. He stood firm, and I think Travis Head played his innings. But Marnus Labuschagne, I think we should go back to the Afghanistan game where Pat Cummins stayed and let Maxwell play. I think there was a similar role, but Labuschagne got some runs. He got a fine half century, and India 240. I think they lost the match in the first innings itself.
Jon, talk to us about Marnus Labuschagne's partner in crime in that final with that wonderful partnership, Travis Head. Not only his innings, which was absolutely superb and match-defining, but also his catch. He caught Rohit Sharma at the back end of the power play when Sharma was going berserk, And that had a crucial impact in the game as well, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Interesting that Head himself remarked that Sharma was very unlucky to be caught out by himself in that manner. But clearly a major moment. We've talked about great ODI innings in previous podcasts when chasing, and Travis Head's innings certainly is now going to go down in ODI history as one of the best. He joins Maxwell and Aravinda de Silva, certainly the latter in terms of for scoring a century when chasing in a World Cup final. I think his innings is in one of the great brackets at 47 for 3. India were pretty jubilant. And I think it's also a lesson in faith in selection. His place in the squad was kept open. We talked about it in earlier podcasts. Would he come back in? We felt that if he did, then it would strengthen the squad. And so it's turned out to be. And I think the coach is largely responsible for that, because from Cummins' statements, he wasn't really convinced that Travis Head could get fit enough in time to make a significant contribution. And that's another call they got right.
Yes, Subas, all hail the Australian think tank of George Bailey, the head selector, and Andrew McDonald, the coach. They were proved right on two very big calls. John's just mentioned persevering with Travis Head there, even when he was injured. And, of course, bringing in Marnus Labuschagne when the left-arm spinner, Ashton Agar, was ruled out through injury. So on both those calls, they were absolutely spot on.
Yeah, I think coming into India and dropping your spinner and bringing in a middle order batsman, I think that was a huge call. And even with Travis Head, I think most of the teams should have dropped him. We saw many teams changing their players throughout the World Cup, but Australia kept faith in him. And I think the first game itself, I think Travis Head announced he announced with a century, and then he just carried on. And I think Head, his fielding ability, his bowling contribution as well, that was a huge factor in his inclusion. And once he was opening the innings with Warner, I think Australia had the call right. And regarding Labuschagne, I think they had an option to change with Cameron Green coming in. They need bowling reinforcement, but I think they never thought that Labuschagne would struggle. And even in the finals, I think it was a big call not to keep Stoinis and keep Labuschagne in the team, because we are always talking about the fifth bowler and how important it was. But credit to Cummins, McDonald, and the Australian selectors. I think they made two big calls, and both of it paid off. I think the World Cup trophy itself, the final itself, defines their inclusion.
John, Australia in 2023. Have a listen to this. World Test champions, Ashes retained, Cricket World Cup winners, all of those things achieved away from home. That's mighty impressive, isn't it?
Well, it certainly is. And it's not just that it's in 2023, it's in 5 months. So this is a huge mental effort, as well as a sign of their cricketing prowess. I think for them, the question is, where next? Cummins himself has alluded to the fact that the squad's aging. He commented that despite that, they were throwing themselves around the field like teenagers. But I think it's the question then, where do they go next? And who comes in? How do they phase people out and get younger players the experience that they need? And if there's any evidence that that's possible, then they've shown plenty of ability not to be sentimental and to get calls right. And we can. I'll say look forward, but we can watch with great interest how they go about that change process.
Well, that's Australia, but what about India now, Subas? They haven't won an ICC event since the Champions Trophy in 2013. They haven't won the ICC Cricket World Cup since 2011. And that despite the fact that they're undoubtedly the best resourced and have the biggest playing group of any country in the world. It's a lot of navel gazing and head scratching from them now, I would imagine.
I think, and after the journey they had, I think 10 out of 10 getting into the finals as one of the favorites that ever was. And the way they were playing, I think it's a big blow for India, and the disappointment will take some time. But the starting T20 series straight away, I think there will be eye on the T20 World Cup starting this June 2024. But Before that, they have IPL, and the team they just announced against Australia. I think majority of the players have played in the Asian Games. They won the gold medal in there, and a lot of youngsters in that team. But India, I think they will have an eye on T20 World Cup. I think the disappointment maybe a bit less once they show their. I think they will challenge for the title in that as well. But I think regarding the other team and India, I think there's a difference in T20 selection because the World Cup just after the IPL, and it will have a huge say in team selection. But they're preparing well. I think the team that has been announced is a new look team, the team for the future. But 2024 is quite close, and there will be a lot of huge calls to make after the IPL for the World Cup.
Let's look now at the ICC Men's Cricket World Cup as a whole. As in 2019, it was 10 teams, which itself was a matter of some controversy as second-tier countries want more access to marquee events like this. It saw 48 matches over 46 days, all over India at 10 venues, and Australia were the winners. But looking at the tournament as a whole, first of all, the format, gentlemen, all play all. Did it work? And I wonder, was it helped by the fact that the ICC Champions Trophy qualification jeopardy for the lower place sides meant there were few, if any dead rubbers? Does the format work?
I think it meant that the best teams got to the semi-finals. I think the format's too long. I think they ought to have more matches on the same day. I realise that the schedule was run by TV companies. There's little interest in matches from Indians, as I witnessed in a number of the matches. So I think it could be shortened, and it would be beneficial to the whole tournament.
What about the biggest positive from the event?
I think it depends who you are, where you come from. If you're Australian, there's a huge positive. If you're Indian, there's a pretty huge negative. But I think looking at it from a neutral perspective, that the biggest positive is the number of records that were broken. Highest aggregate, highest innings score, this number of sixes that were hit, hundreds and chasing, Glenn Maxwell's magnificent effort. So I think those are the things for me that are positive in both individual and team performances. And I think the fact that the Netherlands and obviously Afghanistan came out of the tournament with huge amounts of credit to show that it's not just about the big teams and the big players.
What about the biggest letdown, Sebastian? The biggest disappointment of the tournament?
That might be a bit sad, but I think England, coming into the tournament, especially with Ben Stokes coming back into the team, they were the biggest disappointment. It was expected they were in India to defend their title, but it was very sad to see Josh Butler not firing, Johnny Bairstow having a tournament to forget. Bowling performance, I think this has to be one of the worst bowling attack England has seen. The injuries, I think England was the biggest letdown in this tournament.
The gentlemen, can we call the tournament a success? Sebastian, first of all, what do you think?
For me, I think as an associate, once again, this was a good opportunity. And with the talks, will there be 14 teams? Will there be lesser teams? I think the Netherlands tournament, Netherlands result has certainly give us say that there should be more inclusive tournament. And from the eyes of a TV spectator, I think the World Cup was huge. Indian fans, almost, I think there were a huge number of crowds, not much in the non-India games, but as a TV spectator, I think the tournament was successful.
We have got another edition of this tournament for certain, and that's in 2027 in South Africa, Zimbabwe and Namibia. It'll be a 14-team event with South Africa and Zimbabwe guaranteed inclusion and Namibia having to qualify. 8 teams will join the 2 co-hosts via the ICC rankings, and there'll be 4 qualifiers on top of that. Are you happy, gentlemen, with the change of format and the team numbers? Subas, I suppose everyone in Nepal will be doing cartwheels over this.
Of course, I think we are eyeing in part in the World Cup. I think that has been a dream for most of us. That we're lucky we've qualified for the T20 World Cup that we played already, but ODI World Cup, I think that's the dream. And with extended number of teams and we currently standing around that in the ODI ranking, I think dream's not too far. And South Africa, I think Zimbabwe are already qualified, and Namibia as a host, I think they should qualify. That's a bit harsh on associate team, but I think they compete like us. I think they're also trying for the World Cup. Home World Cup is special, and Nepal, I think, will try to be there as well.
Well, John, 14 teams next time. Now, the one thing I guess that is likely to happen with 14 teams is because some of the weaker teams will get the opportunity to play, there may well be more one-sided games than we saw here. We didn't see all that many close games in this World Cup. So from that perspective, it might necessarily all be rosy in the garden at the inclusion of extra teams.
That's true. I mean, I think it's right that they get the chance. How else are they going to improve unless they get chances to play against the bigger teams? But for me, it's not so much about whether there are more one-sided matches. It's about the scheduling. Will they get that right? Will we have an overly long tournament? I don't think there's any reason why we can't play two matches on the same day other than broadcasting schedules. And I think the other thing as well, we talked before about the propensity of authorities to change things. There is already, I think, some murmurings in India about the jeopardy that this format might place some of the bigger teams in. Will this format, is it set in stone, or will there be some tweaks before the event takes place?
It will be interesting to see how things pan out. We've got 4 years until the next tournament, so let's see what the powers that be decide in that regard. Let's talk now about Pakistan and the fallout there from the failure to reach the semi-finals of the ICC Men's Cricket World Cup continues. On our previous podcast, we covered the fact that Babar Azam has been relieved of the captaincy in all three formats, with Shan Masood replacing him as Test captain and Shaheen Shah Afridi taking over as 2020 international captain. Since then, Mohammed Hafiz, the former opener and off-spinner, he's been installed as men's team director and will be head coach for the upcoming Test tour of Australia. And there's Wahab Riaz as well, the recently retired left-arm fast bowler. He's been appointed as men's chief selector. And the announcements have been coming thick and fast from PCB headquarters at the Gaddafi Stadium in Lahore, as Umar Gul has now been named as fast bowling coach and Saeed Ajmal as spin bowling coach. And John Mickey Arthur's been sidelined, and so has coach Grant Bradburn. And there's been a distinct move back towards Pakistan coaches for Pakistan players, hasn't there?
I think Mickey Arthur's days were numbered with some of the comments he made. I mean, he's outspoken at the best of times, but I think mentions of divine intervention being necessary for the team to make the semi-finals, and the comments well-founded, I think, about the match against India being played in front of 100,000 or so Indians with very few, if any, Pakistani supporters, didn't help his cause. He certainly needed to get to the semi-final, I think, to stand any chance of being retained.
Subas, I guess there's big news in team selection as well, as far as Pakistan are concerned, and that's the absence of Haris Rauf, as Wahab Riaz said he wanted Rauf for the tour of Australia, but Rauf declined to make himself available. That's what Wahab said anyway. He's only played one test, actually, but in the absence of Nazim Shah, he was seen as an important cog in the pace bowling wheel, and he's got Australian experience with the Melbourne Stars in the Big Bash League. How big a blow is it that Haris Rauf is not going to be on this test tour of Australia?
I think it's a sad thing for Pakistan cricket that a player that the nation has believed on has declined to play, and especially with Nasim Shah out injured, I think Haris Rauf could have made most of the condition that he's used to play in Melbourne. I think he's played for 3-4 years now. He's like a local there, and having played the World Cup, I think it was not a good World Cup for Pakistan and Haris Rauf himself, and I think he got an opportunity to prove himself, but I think declining that. He might have I think this might be a blow for his Pakistan cricket future overall, not just for the tests. And Wahab Riaz, he himself emphasized on the importance of Haris Rauf and not giving him much load because he's not used to the test conditions. He said openly that we're using Rauf as impact player, maybe 20 overs per day, and that's the least one fast bowler should be doing for his country. I think it's a disgrace that a player is not is declining a chance to represent his country.
Yes, and it's worth pointing out as well that I think that series comes under the purview of the World Chess Championship qualification for the next cycle there. And of course, Australia are the holders of that World Test Championship. So I'm sure they'll be going all guns blazing to give themselves the best chance of retaining that particular crown. Let's talk about Sri Lanka now. And the ICC board has decided to shift the Under-19 Cricket World Cup from Sri Lanka to South Africa early next year. The move is the latest development in the ICC suspension of Sri Lanka following allegations of political interference in the governance of the game in that country. The suspension doesn't, however, mean that Sri Lanka's teams will be stopped from playing at international level, while funding from the central ICC pot would be controlled until the suspension is lifted. John, in terms of prestige, the removal of the Under-19 Cricket World Cup is certainly a blow to Sri Lanka, as it will be to the many hotels in Colombo who had banked on occupancy from the 16 teams and officials. But as Sri Lanka's allowed to keep playing, have they got away with things, I wonder, to an extent?
Yes, I think they have. I think, as we mentioned last week, there's clearly a lot of toing and froing going on within Sri Lanka between the minister and the board, also between Sri Lankan Cricket Board and the ICC. So this seems to me to be a pretty sensible compromise. Gives Sri Lanka time to new internal arrangements, and it doesn't stop them playing bilateral cricket. It's a minor blow, but I think it could have been a whole lot more serious.
Subas, as you're from Nepal, which has a team set to play in the Under-19 Cricket World Cup, what's the reaction been back home to the news the team will now be off to South Africa instead? Is it relief that the tournament's actually going to happen, or disappointment as conditions are likely to suit Nepal a little less, you would say, in South Africa?
Huge disappointment here, Brian. I think even us as a journalist, a lot of us were planning to go to Sri Lanka for the World Cup. The fans, I think, in the Asia Cup, we outnumbered India and Pakistan. Even in Pakistan, we had a few number of fans going there to watch the match. And once it shifted to South Africa, I think it's been a disappointment. And even within the team, I think the conditions, the team that we have used a spin-heavy team, I think now we'll need to find one or two more fast bowlers, which is hard to find here in Nepal. So it's a huge disappointment that the tournament is not being held in Sri Lanka. Even from the financial side of things for the fans, I think Sri Lanka would have been an ideal destination just to watch the cricket. It was financially feasible for a general fan, but I think South Africa is a tough call. It will be hard for anyone to go there. Even in the result aspect, I think we think we would had a chance in Sri Lanka, but South Africa, I think we're going to struggle there.
One other news line for you from Sri Lanka is that the women's captain, Chamari Atapattu, who's currently playing for Sydney Thunder in the Women's Big Bash, will then head to New Zealand. She's been signed to play in that country's Women's 2020 competition, and that's for the Northern Brave team. Let's talk now about clocks, because the ICC board meeting in Ahmedabad, which followed the Men's Cricket World Cup final, has announced the introduction on a trial basis of a clock to ensure play proceeds at a decent rate. It'll be trialled in white ball cricket from December 2023 to April 2024, starting with England's series in the West Indies in December. The bowling side will have to be ready to start a new over 60 seconds after the end of the previous over, and a third failure to do that will result in a 5-run penalty. Subas, what do you think of that?
I think it's a good move for the pace of the game. I think it will help the game to speed up. ODI cricket, I think it's been criticized for being long, and the delays in between the overs, it has been hampering the watching eyes. But the rules, I think it's good, looks good on paper, but like the timed out rule in the World Cup. Once it's implemented, there will be yes or no. There will be issues in between the teams itself, but it's a good rule to be implemented. I think the teams this rule is better not implemented because they should be keeping up with the pace of the game. But there will be a few controversies, I think, once it's implemented, and the team they'll surely pour out the dissatisfaction once it's implemented against them.
John, what do you think? Would you like to see it even in test matches too? Because I get the impression that test matches have a real problem in this regard as well.
Yes, it's long overdue. I think that speeding the game up, certainly from the spectator's point of view, in terms of getting value for money, is very important. And I would like to see it extended. I think it's time that sides were actually forced into taking action. I think they've had it a bit too easy for too long. They're going to disagree, because they feel that even though they might not bowl 13 or 14 overs an hour, that if the spectators have been provided with entertainment, then they should think themselves lucky. I think from a spectator's point of view, that's the wrong approach. Let's get the game speeded up. Let's find a way of stopping people coming on with a towel for somebody who's got a bit of a sweat on, or change of gloves, or any one of a number of reasons they seem to find to slow play up.
Well, the Men's Cricket World Cup may be over, but the action is absolutely unrelenting. India are hosting Australia in 5 men's 2020 internationals, starting on Thursday, the 23rd of November, dressed up as all part of both sides' preparations for the ICC 2020 World Cup in the USA and the Caribbean next year. I say dressed up, as many of the players from both teams who may well be part of that tournament are not playing in this series due to workload management. India have only 3 players in their squad who were in the Cricket World Cup squad, with Suryakumar Yadav captaining the side. Ishan Kishan will keep wicket, and Shreyas Iyer, he'll step in for the last 2 matches of the series. Australia, well, they actually have 7 players from their World Cup winning squad. That's Travis Head, Steve Smith, Glenn Maxwell, Marcus Stoinis, Josh Inglis, Sean Abbott and Adam Zampa, plus Tanveer Sangha, who was a travelling reserve during the tournament. David Warner was due to be in the squad, but he's heading home, replaced by Aaron Hardy. Matthew Wade is captaining the side. Bear in mind, for the likes of Head and Smith, it'll be a very short turnaround for them, as the final match of the series ends on December the 3rd, and the first test against Pakistan gets underway in Perth just 11 days later. Subas, is there any value for the teams in this series, given how under strength they both are?
I think India, I think their new look team, like I said, the squad consists of a lot of players that played in the Asian Games, and they have showed the worth in the IPL as well. So in India, I think they will be expecting for new talents to fire up. I think Australia, they have got their main squad. They're trying to get it sorted for the T20 World Cup, and the series will have a revenge in mind for Indian spectators, especially after this World Cup result. But both are under strength. But T20, I think both teams have great T20 players, and there will be entertainment. But result-wise, I think not a lot of fans will have their eyes on this tournament like it did in the usual times.
John, can anyone in these squads nail down a spot in the T20 World Cup, do you think?
Steve Smith's going to open. He wants to open. I think he presumably sees this as his way of securing a slot in that team. So his chance with Warner going back, it'll be interesting to see how that one works out. Steve Smith just plays cricket, so I don't think there's any fear about burnout with him.
On the day we're recording this podcast, that's Wednesday, the 22nd of November, 7 teams start their journey to what they hope will be the Caribbean and the USA next year. It's the Men's 2020 World Cup Africa qualifier. There's Kenya, Namibia, Nigeria, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda and Zimbabwe. They've assembled in Windhoek, Namibia for the tournament that will determine which of them will head there, with 2 spots up for grabs. Zimbabwe, under new full-time 2020 international captain Sikandar Raza, they're hot favourites for one place, so they've got a very experienced squad indeed that includes Craig Irvine, Sean Williams, Tender Chitara, Richard Engarava, Ryan Burl, Wellington Masakadza, and also Blessing Musrabani, the tall, quick bowler who's fit again after recovering from a fractured hand. I just wonder, Subas, let's assume that Zimbabwe are going to qualify. Is it simply a battle in this tournament to see who can join them?
I think Namibia, they should be included in that list as well. The other teams, they've been playing it between themselves for quite a time, and African cricket has risen in past few years. I think teams like Nigeria, Tanzania, they've been doing great, not just in men's cricket, but women's too. But I think Namibia and Zimbabwe, they've been around the world playing ODI cricket. They've played quite a few number of series. Their players have been dropped in T20 franchise leagues as well. So Zimbabwe, obviously, they are the favorite ones. But when you talk about Zimbabwe, in that region, I think Namibia deserves a name that they are the favorites to qualify for this as well.
Well, we pride ourselves here on this podcast in trying to feature not only the global stories, but also the local ones too. And the Saudi Arabia National Cricket Championship is a case in point. It wrapped up on Friday, the 17th of November in Riyadh. It was the second edition of the event. Jon, you were in attendance, and perhaps you can give us your impressions. What happened and what did you make of it?
The match was played at a location about 90 kilometres outside of Riyadh on the road to Mecca. It's a venue that hosts some of the major golf tournaments. It has a wildlife, a safari park, a hotel, and for the day it hosted a cricket match. When I got there, it could have been a scene from rural England. The outfield was pretty lush and green, helped by some overnight light rain. The two teams, they consisted pretty well of I think almost entirely Pakistani expats. It was a 20-over match. The Saudi Arabian Cricket Federation and the Sports for All administrators and the president of the Cricket Federation were there in full force. The match was pretty exciting. It went down to the last couple of balls, ending in a 5-run victory and a very impressive lap of honour by the winning team, I have to say. It was played on matting, concrete base, and matting on top. And that's one of the issues in Saudi Arabia is getting the facilities in place so that they can compete internationally. And there is, I think, only one turf wicket there so far. So that's something that needs addressing pretty urgently. And they're going to do, I think, a couple of other finals on the West Coast and I think on the East. It's a long haul. The technology, I have to say, in the ground was excellent. The match was recorded. It was filmed. I searched in vain for about 5 minutes looking for a scoreboard and realised I was actually standing behind it. It was about 5 meters high and 3 meters wide with all the information you require. It was also live streaming the match, so it was a surrealistic experience, standing watching the match in real time and then out of my other eye, I could see it being relayed on a big screen. So an interesting day. The presentations were extensive. There was a prince who led the Saudi Arabian Olympic delegation. There was a well-known lady in media broadcasting who was the compere for the evening. There were numerous awards, and so it shows that there is a desire to develop the game and to get it promoted. I think it's going to be a long haul.
Well, Jon, Saudi Arabia Cricket Federation Vice Chairman Nawaf Al-Otaibi said the ambition is to create world-class infrastructure to make the country a cricketing destination in its own right. How realistic is this, do you think? Is it part of the Saudi Vision 2030 that we've heard so much about?
Yes, it is part of that. It's very ambitious, and I think they've said quite a long way to go to make the country a cricketing destination in its own right. They've done it. Obviously, had a major impact in other sport. Cricket's more difficult it needs infrastructure, and to develop homegrown talent is a generational thing. And I think that what they have to find as a way to get people involved at the grassroots, that the numbers of players registered, the number of teams registered is growing, but I think it's going to be a slow burn.
Well, that's all for this episode of The Wicket. It's been a bumper episode as well, with so much to discuss, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with more cricket chat from the Gulf region, Asia and worldwide. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and comment on what you've heard wherever you get your podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback, and let us know if there's anything you'd like us to feature in future episodes. For now, though, this is Brian Murgatroyd along with Jon Pike and Subas Humagain saying thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to your company again next time.